Hi, it's Colin Seal, and you are looking at the review of Lesson 1, My Jet Please Diagnostic Assessment for the thinkLaw program. So, this lesson is the first of 4 assessments in thinkLaw, but this one is really important because it's a diagnostic. It's going to give you your baseline for how your thinkers are doing when it comes to expressing their critical thinking, really showing their argumentation style, and it's really useful if you can keep these writing samples from the beginning of this course until the very last assessment so you can see how they grow, or if they grow, in their ability through the thinkLaw program. So in the PowerPoint that's provided for this presentation, you will see that there is a link to a video where you can actually watch this commercial play out. This is a really interesting commercial because, everyone knows what Pepsi is, and it's an interesting idea to see, a Harrier fighter jet being advertised for 7 million Pepsi points. And when you read this case, the thing about a lot of thinkers, especially young folks, teenagers, they'll see this commercial and they'll say, well, Pepsi said this, they can get this if they did 7 million Pepsi points, and Pepsi lied. So that's the end of the story. And you might even see some thinkers only write just a couple of sentences here. As you'll see in our sample answer, the actual result that the court reached here was a little bit more nuanced. It wasn't just that Pepsi might not have been telling the truth, but if a soft drink company is talking about selling military equipment, that's pretty unreasonable. Nobody's actually going to believe that you can drink a couple of Pepsis and end up flying a military plane that can destroy villages. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But moreover, doing that would actually hurt some of the creative elements that we like to see in our commercials, where folks tend to exaggerate things and not take things all that seriously. That said, it's not really that important here that your thinkers are getting the right answer. What's more important is that they're following the framework. So I'm going to spend some time and go over the grading rubric. This is the DRAAW+C rubric that we spoke about in the first video. This is how we are trying to get our students to frame their arguments throughout this course, because this is actually a really effective way to frame your arguments in any aspect of life, no matter what sorts of decisions you're making. So we're asking students, and we're looking for a clear decision. We're looking for some sort of rule or law behind that decision, right? So when I've seen this done in the past, most of the time we actually present this slide to the students to let them see what the expectation is for what a good answer would look like. And we don't expect them to necessarily know all the laws around false advertising, but they could come up with a common sense rule behind it, like companies shouldn't be able to lie in commercials unless they use a disclaimer, would be some sort of a rule. Or you can kind of flip that, and students could sometimes say, companies can exaggerate in commercials when it's very clear to the reasonable viewer that it's an exaggeration. However you want to do it, we just want to see some sort of rule or some sort of framework laying that out. We also want to look and see that it's arguments on both sides. And when I say arguments on both sides, we want to find not just some evidence and facts, but actually convincing evidence and facts, persuasive evidence and facts, right? So in this case, if you were trying to argue for John, students would often point out that, well, all the other items that they listed in the commercial seem to be pretty reasonable things that they can get, right? There was no disclaimer, and there was just, maybe you could make an argument that just another item, and they made it really, really hard to get, but if you worked really hard to get it, maybe you should be able to get it. At the same time, you could have arguments for the defendant that give you, the fact that the commercial ended in a punchline, the teacher's clothes were flying off, the books and papers are flying all around the classroom. It's kind of clear that they were making a joke here, so maybe that airplane piece was an extension of that joke. The big piece that we're trying to get thinkers to do, and they probably won't do in this lesson, is come up with some sort of world analysis or public policy, big picture implication, right? It's bigger than Pepsi and John. explain why it's bigger than Pepsi and John. If you rule for John, if you give John this plane, what are you saying? Are you saying that nobody can make exaggerations in commercials anymore? Are you saying that you have to put disclaimers on things that are even seriously unreasonable? At the same time, if you rule for Pepsi and you have a commercial that's targeted towards young people, given by the fact that a teenager was in it, are you really going after and taking advantage of a vulnerable population? That's both some sort of, those are both public policy implications that could be really powerful in that analysis, and then ending it with a conclusion. There's some subjectivity coming here in terms of whether you're designing the awarding 3 points, 2 points, or 1 point. But regardless of the grade level, regardless of the age, there's something about the kind of details that you can see in a strong answer versus one that is not. And it kind of plays out as you go through it. I'm happy to work with you and look through some of the writing samples to help you if you need some assistance on that grading scale. But once you actually finish the activity with your students, for each one of these diagnostics, we always set up just a basic graphic designer, a graphic organizer table that outlines the reasons on both sides. So your goal as a facilitator is to really push students to understand both sides. Whether or not they decided that he should lose or he should win his case, it's really important that they take the time to understand that there's merits to both sides of this argument, or else it wouldn't have actually made it this far into court. Okay, so that is lesson one. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for lesson two.